why was it ever a good idea to be wasteful? And one of the things that really strikes me as funny, there's a big debate over global warming and whether we can address the problems of CO2 emissions without hurting our economies. Depends on whose economy you're talking about. If you're talking about the economy of the world and every human in the world, conservation benefits us all.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. I'm in the historic mining town of Telluride, Colorado, surrounded by the Rocky Mountains at this very lovely spot. I'm at Baked in Telluride, a bakery and eatery, and I'm with the owner, Jerry Green. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining me.
Well, this is a delightful place. I must tell people, warning, if you come to this eatery, you will have a hard time choosing which of the 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 things you want to eat. It's fabulous. Good baked goods. Thank you. How long have you been here, the bakery?
Well, I came to Telluride in 1975 to build the local community radio station. And when I thought that was almost off and running by itself, I had to also make a living. So there was a gentleman who was trying to do a bagel and sandwich shop, and I had the feeling that Telluride needed just one more thing after the radio station, a neighborhood bakery, so people could enjoy locally made baked goods just like I did as a child in Newark, New Jersey.
So, and you said it was a family business back in New Jersey?
Family experience. Everyday life in America used to have a lot more connection with neighborhood bakeries.
Yes.
And I wanted to contribute that to Telluride, even though it was becoming less available in the world at large. In fact, actually, bakeries in general were going out of business wholesale in the early 70s.
In the early 70s, right. Okay. How has it been? That's a big question, I'm sure.
Well, we're still here.
Yes.
If I say what's better, I get a lot of compliments. The tourists and often locals thank me, and I have a wonderful staff that I'm also thankful for. But it's tougher now, really, than it ever was.
Why? What makes that tougher? You're a local business. You're the owner, right? Locally owned?
I'm a local business owner.
And so you're also dealing with probably competition from corporates and supermarkets and other things where people buy baked goods.
Well, that's one of the virtues of Telluride. Since business is so lousy, we don't have a lot of big chains or franchises.
Good for you.
Good for us and bad for us.
Well, so what makes it challenging being here?
What makes it challenging?
There's probably a few things.
Let me put it this way. In the old days, there used to be less business, but we didn't have to work as hard. And I would say in recent years, it seems like there's a new challenge constantly. One of the big challenges right now, the cost of goods is going up at a dramatic rate. Okay. Much faster than you would believe by reading the inflation figures off your TV.
10%? 25%?
Easily 10% a year. Easily.
Uh-huh.
And some items have increased 50% in the last 3 years.
Wow.
There has been a lot of competition, but in maybe the last couple of years, shall we say 4 years ago, I would whine to my friends about how lousy business was because there was a new competitor every month. And they said,
town?
Yeah, they said, well, Jerry, you'll still be here when they're all gone. And a number of them are gone. Mm-hmm. I'm still here. Mm-hmm. Some aspects of the business are better, but there's a new challenge every day.
What kinds of, part of the figure that you have is that you're a tourist town. So how much does that affect your business here, having tourists coming in or not being here? Does it seem to make much difference?
We couldn't do this without the tourist component.
Okay.
And some of the things, one of the strengths of the bakery is, especially because of its production manufacturing nature, we can handle large numbers of tourists at peak periods such as 4th of July, Bluegrass Festival, or New Year's.
So are you also, your business is not only here at your bakery, but are you providing any baked goods anywhere else?
we supply a couple of local hotels and service bread to be sold at retail in markets as far away as Montrose, about 70 miles. And the biggest customers are the two markets in Telluride and Mountain Village, respectively.
So you're doing both retail sales and your bakery. Okay, so you've expanded that.
And the reason I sought to provide service to the markets was to level out the business, especially the out of town was intended to level out the business. It does it somewhat.
Part of what I know you're also involved with are efforts towards moving Telluride towards sustainability, to being more green. What are you doing in your own business in that direction?
Well, what gets me is almost suddenly sustainability, energy conservation is fashionable.
Yes.
And conservation has never been a bad idea.
True.
And local has never been a bad idea. That's why it was called Baked in Telluride, because at the time, practically all of similar products came from anywhere as far as 1,000 miles away.
Wow.
And this is true even in cities where there may be local large bakeries. Still, large numbers of products that would be fresh in a local economy come from far away.
And we're paying attention to the fact that as the oil prices increase, the average food comes, 1,500 miles in America. It's just crazy. You know, some cities that produce eggs are also importing eggs as well as exporting. I mean, it's crazy.
So I've always tried to provide local production, and I try to keep an eye out in terms of what I'm doing today. Yes, I'm looking more for local items. In the summer, I try to buy more local produce. My eggs come from what in the east would be considered far away, about 120 miles away in Grand Junction, but there's definitely a conscious choice to seek local ingredients.
Fairly local. What do you do in terms of your building, in terms of your energy use? What kinds of things you try to do?
I've never relied much on heat just for heat. That since it's a bakery, we have ovens going almost all the time, and we open and close ventilation systems to regulate the temperature, and most of the heat comes from byproduct of making the product.
Smart. So you're saving, you're using it twice, if you will. You're using your energy. Any other ways you're trying to conserve?
Just in terms of likewise heating and cooling, I use swamp coolers because the climate is generally dry, and it's far less expensive than compressor-based AC.
Air conditioning. So you're saving for your own bottom line, but you're also saving the big picture, energy use, electricity use, and so on. Have you any thoughts about whether or not, or has your town allowed you to do anything with photovoltaics? Has that been on your thoughts?
I haven't really considered it. Other people have worked on it. The town is now more friendly to photovoltaics as far as the architectural regulations, but it's still costly to do so. You have to have deep pockets to invest in substantial photovoltaics.
So we're going to have to wait for the time when the governments and so on give incentives or rebates or whatever to help it happen.
The other things that are fashionable are efficient lighting. I replaced all my incandescent bulbs over 20 years ago.
So you're ahead of the curve, where you can be, it sounds like.
It just doesn't seem, why was it ever a good idea to be wasteful? Yeah. And one of the things that really strikes me as funny, there's a big debate over global warming and whether we can address the problems of CO2 emissions without hurting our economies. It depends on whose economy you're talking about. If you're talking about the economy of the world and every human in the world, conservation benefits us all.
Yes.
Look at the 70s, when we were under the gun, so to speak, of the Arab oil
embargo,
embargo coalition. We beat them. We decreased our energy use in this country. We improved efficiency of energy use. While it has proceeded a little bit, we slacked off dramatically, and then energy prices came back again to bite us.
Yeah, and meanwhile, we had lost those 30 years to have energy-efficient cars and energy-efficient buildings because we were awash in oil, cheap oil. Here we are, get to do it again.
Yeah, even when oil was cheap, it was always a good idea to look for efficiencies.
Yeah, yeah. What kinds of, we talked to you earlier and you told us something that sort of startled us, that in your town, you're using electricity or propane to warm sidewalks, to melt snow. Did I understand that right?
I don't have any sidewalk melting here.
Not you personally, but in town that happens.
The bakers are the people who open, shovel the snow in the morning. But yes, many sidewalks, driveways to private homes are heated with fossil fuel energy.
I got to admit, I'd never heard of such a thing, and it just blew me away as a way to waste, to my mind, waste energy. It's astounding.
Agreed, seems strange.
It is, it is.
One of the curious consequences, people melt their sidewalks, and then because of the frost heave situation, the curb separates from the sidewalk. So then they had a great idea, well, okay, we'll heat the curbs. Well, now the curb is separating from the street. Well, there's actually some proposal in a proposed renovation of Main Street to heat even more of the traveled way. It's just like you're chasing a problem into oblivion. You're never going to catch up.
And of course, there's simpler solutions, like hire people with shovels, I would hope.
Labor is not easy. That's certainly
true.
One of the challenges of running this business.
What are the kinds of things that you think could be done to make things more sustainable for business owners in your situation, your whole community, whatever? What kinds of things can towns be doing? Can utilities be doing on all those fronts?
Well, the best thing for my business would be to level out the season somewhat. It's okay to have an off season. We like to be able to kick back. It's one of the pleasures of living in a resort town. But there is a growing tendency for people not to be able to live in town because they can't afford the cost of housing. So we work hard on housing in this town, and there are things we could do differently, perhaps, to generate more housing. More people living in town stabilizes the businesses. And then, of course, we want to also have people shop in town and not drive out of town for shopping.
So leveling out the seasons largely could happen from housing people affordably.
That's one thing. That's one big thing that would help.
How far do people have to be coming, your seasonal workers, how far do they have to be commuting to get into
My seasonal workers, most of my workers live in Telluride.
Great.
Then some live in the Ridgeway or the Norwood area, which is roughly 35 miles away. Sometimes people drive from as far as Montrose, but I'm fortunate in my business to have most of my employees living in town, and this is made possible largely because of the efforts we made at public housing.
And what did you do there?
What did we do in public housing?
Yeah, what did you do in your public housing?
Well, from the earliest days of the ski resort, housing was difficult. I spent my time on floors and couches and closets, and it was always difficult. And depending on the nature of business, we'd have periods of more difficult or less difficult housing. Well, finally, we got to a point where it was perceived to be a crisis, and we better do something about it before it's too late. And we started building public housing in town, and we also devised systems of ownership to keep the cost of ownership under control.
What did you do?
Because
that's in the ownership, because that's the challenge you're facing is true of a lot of communities.
Well, the original concept was you would have a locals market big enough to control the cost. And this has somewhat been lost, that you would need to qualify to be able to buy in the locals market.
So you had to have certain qualifications for income and residency here and other things that would...
Yeah, right. So we have quite a bit of housing like that. A lot of it especially is about 3-4 miles out of town at Lawson Hill. But the pace of demand has grown a little larger when allowed to the free market. What's done now is putting a price cap on so that appreciation can only take place at about 3% a year. Nevertheless, there's a political choice to be made between providing for the political demands of ownership housing and providing for the needs of community business, which tend more towards rental housing, and in particular because you can, in the long run, build more rental housing than you can ownership housing. And
because you can be more compact with building it?
Well, that's one advantage to why you can build it cheaper, but the long-range advantage is you issue bonds, you build housing, you pay off the bonds. Oh, let's refinance. Now we have more money. Also, the changing interest rates give you advantages of being able to refi. So the rental housing retains in the public ownership, and as such can generate further capital for further housing. It's a political dilemma because the more transient employee or the employee who isn't able to own for whatever reason, they generally don't have as much political clout as the people who are likely to own.
That's true. That's true.
Not all bad either way, but it's a dilemma to deal with.
If you were the person that could sort of magically change the environment to be more sustainable for people, not just businesses, just for people attempting to live in your beautiful community for a long time, what kinds of things do you hope will happen, might happen in the future?
I would encourage compact development. That's the biggest single contributor to efficiency in general of housing and housing systems and transportation. And likewise, as I was saying, the more people live close to the business community, the stronger is the community business.
Would a walkable town be feasible for you here?
We're a pretty walkable town.
I mean, I realize that in the historic district, but having rentals, or do those have to be further out in town because you've gotten all your building sites built on?
We still have opportunities to build housing in town, and the adjacent town, Mountain Village, is connected by a gondola, which also makes for pedestrian friendliness.
And back there, we just heard a big caterpillar fire itself up. Talk about building in town. I just let people know what they're going to hear out there.
This is the business-friendly nature of town. My otherwise peaceful porch is going to be under attack for the next several months while this building across the street is expanded.
Well, I'm glad it's not happening not at their peak season, perhaps. So we've talked about housing. What's happening anything happening relative to transportation here? You've got a walkable community for people that are nearby. Do you have just one main feeder road? We came in through one highway. Is that the main way in and out of town? Is one road?
There's one road that leads out of town 3 miles, and then you can go south to Cortez about 80 miles, or north to Montrose about 70 miles.
So if you folks come into an emergency, you have several ways to get out of town if you need to.
Probably our greatest strength in emergency situations and why they don't turn into disasters is we're a small community. Including Mountain Village, which is connected by the gondola, we have about 4,000, 4,500 people.
That is small.
And we can accommodate a similar number of tourists. A large town, right away, you have trouble. When Houston wanted to prepare for their hurricane onslaught, they discovered that they didn't have enough highways to be able to move people out of town in individual cars, or enough buses to put them in the buses.
That's true. With a smaller town, you've got a little more...
And if you look at what you would like to be doing with regard to our outlying commerce, we'd like to have more public transportation to Montrose, but we are not there yet. We're hardly there. We really don't have public transportation to Montrose.
So it's all private vehicles coming in and out.
There's some shuttle-type limousine services. Some people carpool. Can I throw something almost off topic?
Absolutely. Sure. We'll see where it goes.
We have a lot of immigrants in this country.
Yes.
And we're not as welcoming as a country as we might be, but perhaps we have a lot to learn from our immigrant neighbors. And one of the reasons I think immigrants have felt at home in Telluride is they're used to taking public transportation.
Yes.
Public transportation is generally good in third world countries. It may be crowded, but even when it's crowded, it's frequent.
Yes, it's there.
Well, here in Telluride, we have public transportation, and people live, it's all of a mile away at the west end of town. The greatest users of public transportation are the immigrants because it's always been a part of their life.
Sounds to me that, I've been thinking about that the immigrants have a number of things going for them that we could learn from. One is the use of public transportation and shifting their lives to be able to do that. I mean, to not just at a drop of the hat be able to use it.
When I was a kid in Newark, New Jersey, that was one of the great things about growing up is I wasn't restricted to getting rides from mom. There was public transportation.
You just pop on the bus and away you go. Yeah, I grew up in suburbs in Northern California, and they didn't have public transportation. I had my bike, And that's what we used in the 50s. But that wasn't built in to the suburban culture, and still isn't, of course. I think immigrants also are more comfortable with living in smaller places, sharing.
Yeah, the phenomenon where in the U.S. there are smaller families and larger houses.
Yes, yes.
The bakery, curiously in the bakery, from time to time I rearrange things and people say, "You've expanded." No, I've just made better use of the space.
Efficiency, right. I think that that's part of where the huge opportunities lie for most Americans, is we have lots of room to go in conserving, like you've already been doing in your business, and using space more wisely, as well as energy more wisely. Those are big opportunities that I think we're going to need to see, we will see, particularly as the costs go up for energy, for water, for everything.
And what's your favorite product in the bakery?
Well, I haven't tried one of each yet, but I got to say that the peanut butter chocolate chip cookies are really good.
We use a natural roasted peanut butter, and it's based on the traditional recipe from Joy of Cooking.
Joy of Cooking. Oh, well, that's good to know. So it's delicious, and it's creamy, it's buttery, it's yummy. I also noticed, though, some eclairs, so I think I'll have to give it a try just to make sure that what else you do on the other end.
You can, I use pretty much all natural ingredients, and practically everything is from scratch. And it's curious to see the march of industry and the development of artificial ingredients.
Yes, yes.
Sometimes they turn out to be the wrong direction, and we have to go back. So when we recognized we had to go back from products that had trans fats.
Yes, yes.
Well, one of the alternatives I had to go back to was butter.
I'm really happy to hear that.
And it tastes really good.
It makes a huge difference in the flavor. Frankly, I won't cook with anything but butter for a solid fat. Butter and coconut oil, coconut butter, they're good for you too. I think we've been fed a lie about the fats. That fats are what are causing our obesity. I'd point to corn syrup and sugars to more likely. So in our last 5 minutes here, anything else that we haven't covered that's looking at what it's like being a local business and how to promote that, what it's like to be sustainable and how to promote that? Any other hot topics?
Challenge of living in business or as a citizen has got to be politics. If you want to get something out of your government, and we can't live without government one way or another.
Probably true.
Maybe we could have less or more government depending on the circumstances, but we can't live without government. Well, government can't do a good job of serving us if we're not involved in politics. I spent 3 years on town council, and it's not easy when you have to run a business to be in government. Well, it's equally not easy to be in business and have to provide input to your government and lobby your council people, attend meetings, make speeches, and so on. But bitching about the government doesn't get you very far.
No, you have to have your voice in there where it can make some kind of difference, and talk to your others to help make those changes that you see need to happen, or help make them happen. Do you find that your town councils are fairly responsive? I'm sure you tried to be while you were on town council.
My feeling is my present council, all governments like to say how business friendly they are. In the large scale, on the federal government, it's a matter of which business they're friendly to. But because of the demands of being on council, it's difficult for business people to be involved. As a result, we have a council composed of people who are not in business and don't understand. So they keep thinking of brilliant ideas for us, and they can't understand why we don't like them.
Because they're not in touch, because that's not in their shoes. That experience.
And curiously, one of their answers was to hire a person to represent business. Well, what good is that? It's just going to give you another layer that separates government from business.
Instead of being able to cultivate the questions from the business community themselves?
Well, good government doesn't just sit there and wait for the people to come to it. Also, good government gets out on the street and find out what's really going on.
That finds out. So we have about 2 minutes left. Involved in politics. Business has to have a voice there, right? As well as running your own business.
Business, citizens, everybody.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The one of the things that I'm curious about is you've got a historic district here. It's lovely, Victorian era, mining era, beautiful buildings. And it strikes me that, actually a question is, how much of your business economy here in Telluride is what I'd call a local and living economy, meaning you're meeting the real needs of your real folks as opposed to the tourists? I mean, you have lovely art things for your tourists and so on, but how much, your hardware store, your plumbing supply, you know, that, how much of that is here?
It's all complicated. The nature of the economy is substantially built based on real estate and building, construction, remodel, all those things. But in my business, it would be reasonable to say about half local, half tourists.
In Telluride downtown itself, do you think? Not just your bakery, but I mean, I don't mean who comes to patronize you, but of the types of businesses that are here in your business community. How many do you think are, what portion are just here to really, are focused on serving what the locals need, and how many to tourists?
I wouldn't venture a guess, but there are other businesses like mine for whom providing a local service, valuable to tourists as well as locals, is important. That there's some people who are in business to please themselves, and there are those of us who are in business to take care of the needs.
Serve your community.
And in the end, the rewards come down to, I'd say every week at least, a tourist takes me aside and wants to give me a special thank you. And as always, I say, you know, what keeps me going is you and my staff. That's who I'm working for, and that's why I'm still in business.
I could feel that when you walk into the place. You know, there's a vitality. It's like, this is the place to be. The prices are reasonable. The food looks good and hearty. It looks made right here. You know, it's not packaged all up in plastic wrap. I should add that you've got not just baked goods here, but you've got an eatery. So there's muffins and cheese, and there's tacos and all kinds of goodies.
Sandwiches, homemade pasta, all kinds of stuff.
You know, I'm going to get real hungry just sitting here talking to you. I think we might have to close this and go take a bite to eat. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with me. And I wish you well here. Keep it up and keep influencing the rest of the businesses around you. Thank you. You're watching Peak Moment, Community Responses for a Changing Energy Future. I'm Junea Donaldson. Thanks for watching.